July 16, 1988. Lake Wren, Oregon. A cool, glassy lake at sunrise. The Johnsons, Mark, 38, and his 12-year-old son, Cole, set off for a day of fishing. Locals remember the father as quiet, reliable. The boy? Bright-eyed, obsessed with lures. And lake legends. They were seen launching their aluminum boat just before 6 a.m. By sunset, they hadn't returned. Search teams scoured the forest. Helicopters swept the water. No wreckage, no footprints, no blood. Just a single thermos found half buried near the dock 2 days later. Then nothing. For 9 years, the Johnsons were two faces on a bulletin board. Until 1997, when a pair of divers made a shocking discovery. Deep below the lake's surface. What they found didn't just rewrite the investigation. It exposed a story far darker than anyone. Imagine this isn't just a missing persons case. It's a buried secret someone hoped would never surface. It was still dark when the Johnson house lit up just before 5 a.m. In the kitchen, Mark Johnson, 38, filled an old dented thermos with black coffee. He didn't speak much. Didn't need to. Across the room, his 12-year-old son Cole sat cross-legged on the floor, checking his tackle box like it was mission gear. Hooks, lures, and that lucky green bobber. Fishing was their thing. Every Saturday for the past 2 years, like clockwork. Just the two of them. Mark liked the silence. Cole liked the stories, especially the ones about lake monsters. The house smelled faintly of oil and burnt toast. Mark stood at the window longer than usual, staring out at the still dark sky over Lake Wren. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, sighed, and looked down at the thermos like he forgot what it was. Cole noticed. "You okay, Dad?" Mark snapped out of it. "Yeah, just tired." He forced a smile. Steam curled from the thermos lid as he screwed it shut. From the living room, the soft sound of loons echoed from a Wildlife Calendar's cassette player. Cole zipped his tackle box shut. Just another Saturday. But something about Mark's pause, something unspoken, hung in the air longer than it should have. Neighbor Doris McMillan was watering her porch plants when she saw them. Mark's green pickup rolled slowly down the gravel drive, trailer in tow, aluminum boat strapped tight. It wasn't unusual. She'd seen them head out like this dozens of times. But something was different. Mark didn't have his usual beat-up duffel bag. He had 3. 2 black, 1 faded blue, plus a large sealed plastic container that looked like something used to haul tools or chemicals. Cole hopped out to check the boat straps. He looked smaller than usual in the fog, hoodie pulled tight, rod tube slung over his shoulder. Doris gave a gentle wave. Cole waved back. Mark didn't. He was standing at the truck bed, arms crossed, staring at the lake like he was calculating something. Not relaxed, not ready to fish. She tilted her head. "Mark?" she called. He didn't answer. Just loaded the final bag and climbed into the driver's seat. The truck rolled forward and disappeared into the mist. Doris stood there a few seconds longer, hose still running, water pooling around her feet. She would later say, "He looked like he was headed somewhere he didn't want to go." Surveillance footage from the Exxon on Route 9 shows Mark the day before Friday, 6:47 p.m. He parks, walks slowly to the ATM, and inserts his card. The cameras, grainy black and white. The time stamp flickers. Mark's hands are stiff. He punches in the pin and pulls out $900, 3 crisp stacks of 20s. The machine spits out the receipt. He stares at it for a solid 10 seconds, not reading, just staring. According to his bank records, that was the most he'd ever withdrawn. At once. No prior large purchases. No bill due. He folds the receipt, then looks upright at the camera, though he probably doesn't know it's there. His eyes are sunken. He looks unsure, like he's bracing for something. He doesn't buy gas, doesn't go inside. just walks back to the truck and drives off. Investigators would later pause this footage over and over, frame by frame. Nothing dramatic happens. No one else appears. But the mood in that shot, it's heavy. Like a man carrying something no one else can see. Mark was preparing for something. And whatever it was, it started with that $900. That was the last confirmed sighting of him before the morning they vanished. The pickup rumbled into the marina lot just after 6:15 a.m. A few other trucks were already there. Weekend anglers prepping bait and sipping gas station coffee. Mark didn't speak to anyone. Security footage from the boat launch shows the Johnsons working in sync. Mark lowers the aluminum boat into the water while Cole ties off gear. No rush, no panic. Just quiet focus. Then, the final image. Cole, standing at the edge of the dock, glancing back at shore right at the camera. He adjusts his hoodie. Mark starts the outboard motor. A plume of exhaust rolls across the lake. The boat drifts forward and disappears into a thick morning mist that blankets the water like gauze. The lake is completely still. It's the last time anyone sees them alive. Another fisherman would later say, they just disappeared. 1 minute. They were there. Next minute, gone into the fog. By 10:30 a.m., back at the house, Cole's dog, a retriever named Bandit, starts pacing near the door. Then whining, then scratching. It's a behavior Mark's ex-wife, Lena, has never seen. She assumes it's nothing. Maybe the dog heard something, but the sound doesn't stop. By noon, Bandit is howling at the back window. Lena calls Mark's pager. No answer. She tries his landline. It rings 5 times, then voicemail. She brushes it off. Mark's probably out of range on the lake. But something inside her shifts. A pressure she can't explain. The house is still, except for the clock in the kitchen. Tick, tick. Something feels wrong. She doesn't know it yet, but the truck Mark drove to the lake? It's still sitting there, untouched. Keys gone. No footprints. Just tire tracks. And water. Waiting. By 7:30 p.m. The sun was low over Lake Wren. Orange bled into purple as the shoreline emptied. But Mark Johnson's green pickup was still parked. Near the boat ramp, trailer hitched. No movement. Park ranger Jared Deeks spotted it first. He didn't think much of it at first. Maybe they were camping out. Maybe Mark had taken Cole deeper into the inlet to night fish. But when he walked by, something felt wrong. The tackle box was still open in the truck bed, half packed. Inside, a spool of line, 2 unopened worm containers, and Cole's red and yellow bobber. Mark's keys weren't in the ignition. His wallet wasn't on the seat, and the thermos from that morning? Still wedged between the seats, untouched. Deeks waited another hour. Nothing. By the time the sun slipped behind the trees, the truck sat in shadow. Headlights reflecting in the still water. He made the call just before 9 p.m. Something wasn't right. At 12:14 a.m., Cole's mother, Renee, filed a missing persons report with the county sheriff's office. She told them this wasn't like Mark. He never missed a call. Never kept Cole out overnight without telling her. 2 deputies arrived at Lake Wren by 12:50 a.m. They scanned the area, first with flashlights, then high beams from their patrol cruiser. The fog had lifted, but the lake gave nothing back. Just cold air and the hollow knock of water against the dock. One deputy radioed it in. Vehicle found. No occupants. No sign of return. The other, Deputy Lennox, paced the gravel. He squatted near the dock edge, stared out into the black water for a while, then muttered quietly, "They didn't come back, did they?" Renee arrived at 1:30 a.m. She ran straight to the truck, calling Cole's name again and again. Her voice echoed across the lake. No response. Just trees. Just water. The official search began at dawn. By 6 a.m., the boat ramp had turned into a full staging area. Local SAR teams brought in canines, sonar equipment, airboats, and divers. The search stretched across a 6-mile radius. 3 dogs sniffed along the dock, one stopping at the edge and whining, pawing at the boards. Another circled the back of the truck, then sat down. Handler called it a strong scent point. But there was nothing else. No blood, no clothing. Number. Drag marks. Boats swept the lake in grids. Side-scan sonar painted the bottom in high-contrast black and white. A few false positives: logs, boulders, old garbage. But no hull, no bodies, no gear. Not even an oar. By noon, they had covered nearly every known fishing cove. One pilot reported how eerily calm the lake felt, like it didn't want to give anything up. Deputies stood on the shoreline, watching the water. It wasn't just the absence of evidence. It was how silent everything felt. Too silent, like the lake had swallowed them whole. By day 3, the search grid widened. Helicopters swept farther south along the shoreline. That's when a park ranger spotted something unusual near a muddy inlet over 2 miles from the original launch point. Wedged under driftwood and half sunken in silt was a battered metal thermos. The initials MJ were faint but visible under a coat of algae and grime. It was Mark's, the same one he'd filled with coffee that morning. The area was taped off. Photos taken. The thermos was bagged and rushed to evidence. But there were no other items nearby, no footprints, no drag marks. Just the thermos, sitting there like it had been placed. Then, on day 5, another clue surfaced downstream. A small plastic bait box, cracked at the hinge. Inside were 3 lures, one still hooked to the foam. It matched a set Cole had shown his teacher just a week earlier. Investigators were torn. Were the items drifting from the scene? Or had someone tried to scatter them, throwing off the trail? There was still no sign of the boat. No bodies. Just things that shouldn't have made it that far, unless something or someone had moved them. With no physical evidence of foul play, theories began to circulate. Small towns talk fast, especially when they're afraid. Some believe the obvious. They drowned. Maybe the boat tipped in deeper water. Maybe Mark had a heart attack. Maybe Cole panicked and went under. But the sonar said otherwise. No debris, no hull, no signs of a submerged craft. Others whispered darker theories. One suggested Mark had staged it, taken the cash from the ATM, packed extra gear, and disappeared into the woods. Maybe even crossed the border. But why bring Cole? And why risk the lake? Another theory floated through the diner. Ambush. One old-timer claimed he saw a white van parked along a forest road that morning, no plates. Another insisted it was a robbery gone wrong. Maybe Mark owed money. Maybe someone came to collect. The sheriff's office gave no official comment. The only thing they confirmed: there was no struggle on land and no signs of forced entry on the truck. By the end of the first week, local papers ran the headline that would stick for years: gone without a trace. On the 8th day, an envelope appeared at the front desk of the sheriff's office. No return address, no postage, just a single sheet of paper typed in bold, uneven letters. Mark Johnson was in too deep. He owed the wrong people. This wasn't an accident. Check under the surface. That's all it said. The sheriff's team dusted it for prints. Nothing usable. The paper was standard stock, the typewriter style, cheap and dated. The envelope had no marks, no traceable fibers, no DNA. It could have come from anyone. But the wording hit hard. In too deep. It didn't sound like a stranger guessing. It sounded like someone who knew something. The note was logged as evidence. Investigators went back through Mark's financials, his work records, his phone logs. No debts, no calls, no flagged accounts. But there were gaps weekends where no one could confirm his whereabouts. Detective Riley stared at the lake the next morning. It was perfectly still again. No breeze, no boats. He folded the note and slid it into his jacket pocket. Then he said, mostly to himself, "So who's under the surface, Mark, or someone else?" The lake didn't answer. It never did. By the end of August, the search teams began packing up. Boats were trailered, dogs were sent home, and Lake Wren returned to stillness. But the town didn't. Missing posters with Mark and Cole's faces covered gas station doors and grocery store windows. One kid at the local high school drew a tribute mural in chalk, Mark holding a fishing pole, Cole holding his dad's hand. It rained the next day. The mural was gone by morning. Inside the sheriff's office, the energy shifted. Briefings got shorter. Updates became vague. One deputy started showing up late. Another took vacation. The corkboard in the incident room still held a single Polaroid. Mark and Cole standing beside their boat, both smiling. A thumbtack pinned it crooked. Someone had drawn a red question mark in the corner. Locals whispered that something darker had happened. Some refused to speak about it at all. One elderly neighbor said, "The lake took them, but it didn't keep him." That's worse. The days dragged. The posters faded. But the silence only got heavier. By week 4, it didn't feel like a rescue anymore. It felt like a waiting room with no door out. Mark's ex-wife, Renee, sat down with investigators on day 26. She said Mark had been different for months. Quiet, nervous. Said he kept checking the back windows at night, even when Cole wasn't around. He thought someone was following him, she said. "I told him he was being paranoid. Now I'm not so sure." One of Mark's co-workers at the machine shop echoed that. Claimed Mark had once said, "If anything happens to me, check the lake." At the time, they'd laughed it off. Now it didn't seem funny. And then there was the drifter. A cod man seen sleeping behind the town laundromat the week before the disappearance. Scruffy, thin, wearing a green army coat. He'd asked about fishing spots, then vanished. Locals swore. He looked like someone from a wanted poster out of Idaho. Police released a composite sketch. It rained the next day. Half of the flyers peeled off poles before nightfall. Some thought it was all nonsense. A town chasing shadows. Others thought the drifter was real and had found them first. But no one ever saw him again. And by now, it didn't matter whether people believed it or not. They just wanted something to be true. 6 weeks in, a detective named Riley flagged something odd in Mark's financials. 6 months before the disappearance, Mark had quietly doubled his life insurance policy from $75,000 to $150,000. It wasn't flagged at the time. He passed the physical, signed the papers, paid on time. But what stood out was the beneficiary section, left blank. No name, just a line through the space. The insurance rep confirmed it. "We contacted him twice to update the paperwork," she said. He never replied. And now no body, no payout. Legally, without a death certificate or confirmed remains, the company had no obligation. They ruled it as missing, presumed unknown. Case pending. Policy frozen. Detective Riley replayed a voice memo from the agent. Her words stuck in his head. It's like he knew something was coming. Like he knew he wouldn't be here to explain it. The file was marked inconclusive, but internally, it lit up a new theory. If Mark expected to die, but not by accident, then someone else may have known too, or worse. Planned it with him. Either way, it wasn't just a fishing trip anymore. It was premeditated or punished, and nobody knew which was worse. While investigators wrestled with dead ends, life in the town staggered forward, but not evenly. especially not at Briar Glen Elementary, where Cole's fourth-grade desk stayed exactly as he left it. His chair remained tucked in, his name tag, Cole J., still taped to the top in red marker. No one moved it, not even when new seating charts came out in October. The janitor would later say he dusted the desk every Friday, quietly, without being asked. Inside the lost and found box sat Cole's backpack. Olive green, a broken zipper tab, and a Batman keychain clipped to the front strap. No one claimed it. No one could. His best friend, a kid named Tyler Brinks, was often seen whispering to the backpack during lunch. Sometimes he'd smile at it. Sometimes he'd just cry. No one stopped him. Teachers avoided that corner of the room. One even moved the bulletin board so it wouldn't cast a shadow over Cole's chair. Winter came. Then spring. But that desk never moved. Never filled. And every time the classroom door opened, part of you expected to see Cole walking out of breath, apologizing for being late. He never did. Detective Jack Riley had worked missing persons before, but something about this one got under his skin. Even after being formally rotated off the case in early January, he kept digging. He set up his own evidence wall in the basement. A converted laundry room with a cement floor, space heater, and one folding chair. On the far wall, a corkboard filled with every clue he could find. Photos, receipts, timeline printouts, fishing maps. A red line ran through them like a wound. His wife called it the war room. Said he'd come down after dinner and stay for hours. Sometimes, she said, she'd hear him talking to the wall. One night, he clicked on a cassette recorder and said, February 11th. There's something we're not seeing. This wasn't just a drowning, not just a death. It's like someone planned this, like the lake was step 3, not step 1. The recording ends with a long silence. Then a whisper, this isn't over. He logged everything, but no one was listening anymore. Not officially. But that wall stayed up. And every week, Riley added one more THUMBTACK, just to remind himself. It mattered. By April 1989, the file was officially declared cold. Search funding ran out. Dive teams were reassigned. The billboard on Route 7 helped find Mark and Cole. Johnson was painted over with an ad for lawnmowers. The last public update was delivered in a brief statement. All viable leads have been exhausted. Reporters didn't even show up. The file was boxed and sealed at the station, stored under Johnson Lake disappearance, and slid into a metal drawer labeled 88-C. Sheriff Tuller retired that summer. The deputy who first found the truck transferred to Salem. People stopped asking questions. Most of them at a sparsely attended town hall meeting that May. A woman in the back, her voice barely audible, stood up and asked a question no one could answer. But where's the boy? The room went quiet, not because no one had thought it, but because no one wanted to hear it out loud. Outside, the lake sat still under a pink sky. No boats, no noise, just wind moving across the surface in small, meaningless ripples. The same lake everyone once believed would give them answers. But by now, even the lake had gone quiet, and stayed that way for the next 9 years. 9 years later, in the summer of 1997, Lake Wren changed. A brutal drought swept through Oregon, the worst in 4 decades. Rainfall was nearly non-existent. Reservoirs dipped, crops wilted. And slowly, Lake Wren's shoreline began to shrink. Locals noticed first a boat ramp, once underwater, now extended like a dry tongue into the cracked lake bed. Kids rode bikes where trout used to swim. Families wandered the exposed banks with cameras, kicking over beer cans and rusted lures like scavenger hunters. The lake, once bottomless and dark, was now revealing a history no one asked for. Chunks of earth split like broken clay, lost tires, rotten stumps. A half-buried paddleboat from the 1960s re-emerged near the inlet, but something else was waiting, just beyond where the drop-off used to be. 40 feet down, past the reach of sunlight, hidden under decades of sediment and silence. Most believed the Johnsons were gone, swallowed, lost in fog and time. But now, the lake was letting go, slowly, reluctantly. And on one hot August weekend, a recreational dive group from Salem came to explore what the drought had unearthed. They weren't searching for bodies, they were just looking for something. Interesting, what they found changed everything. Sunday morning, August 17th, 1997. Two experienced divers, Tom Kersey and Elena Ruiz, descended near the lake's southern wall, an area once too deep for safe exploration. Visibility was poor. The water was thick with silt and algae stirred by the drought's shifting pressure. Tom's flashlight barely cut a few feet ahead. Elena followed close behind, her fingers brushing the rock face. They expected to find debris, maybe old fishing gear or a sunken tree. Instead, roughly 40 feet down, something metallic caught Tom's beam. A dull glint, curved, buried halfway in the mud. He motioned for Elena. They hovered, brushing silt aside with gloved hands. The shape was unmistakable. The crushed bow of a small aluminum boat, its frame partially collapsed but still intact. Lines of fishing cable floated in slow motion. Around it like webbing. Tom turned to signal to find, but Elena didn't move. She was staring at something just beyond the crushed hull. A pale shape, round, smooth, almost white. A skull, half buried. In the silt, its mouth locked open, its eye sockets filled with drifting sand. She didn't scream, just pressed her palm against her mask, then turned on the ascent light. The recovery took hours. Local police, now under a new sheriff, were called. Immediately, dive specialists were brought in. The area was marked off, and the boat was carefully lifted from the lake bed using winch lines and inflatable lift bags. The vessel broke the surface just after dusk, dripping lakeweed and silt. It was corroded but unmistakable, matching the description of the Johnsons' boat filed 9 years earlier. Serial number still visible beneath the grime. Inside was a time capsule of frozen horror, a rusted red and white cooler, 2 collapsed lawn chairs, a tackle box with every lure still in place. And in the stern section, caught between twisted netting and snapped wiring, human remains, mostly skeletal. The skull was intact, wedged behind the captain's bench. A hand, fingers bone thin, was wrapped in fishing line, the wire curled tightly around what remained of the wrist. There were fractures rib cage, left side of the jaw, 1 boot, still on. The scene didn't look accidental. The body was tangled like someone had struggled, not fallen. The netting had barbed hooks embedded in the clothing, suggesting movement, panic, a fight. DN, a testing would later confirm it. The remains belonged to Mark Johnson, but only 1 set of remains was recovered. There was no sign of Cole, not a single bone, not a single trace, just an empty space beside his father, where a second person should have been. And just like that, the case was open again. As the boat dried under a police tarp, crime scene tape fluttered in the breeze. The wreck was hauled to a secured garage on the outskirts of town. Investigators in white suits began their slow clinical work. The remains were sent to the state medical examiner. Within 72 hours, dental records confirmed what everyone already feared. The body belonged to Mark Johnson. His driver's license photo mark, smiling beside a boat, was placed next to a digital overlay of the recovered teeth. A perfect match, but it wasn't drowning. That theory unraveled fast. Blunt force trauma to the back of the skull. A single crushing blow. Deep, focused, enough to kill on impact. The kind of injury that didn't happen in a boat accident. The Kind that required intention. In other words, Mark had been murdered. There were other disturbing details: rope fibers in the clothing, sediment in the mouth, microabrasions on the hands. Signs of restraint, of struggle, but still no Cole. Search teams scanned the immediate area with magnetometers and underwater drones. Nothing. Not a single trace of a second body. No second set of bones. No child's belongings. The whiteboard in the detective's office was updated with one new question, circled 3 times. Where's the boy? The town reacted fast, but not in one voice. For some, Mark's confirmed death was closure, a grim relief. A terrible ending, yes, but at least an ending. Locals gathered for a vigil by the lakeshore. Candles lined the dock. Flowers floated on the water. A choir of whispers asked the same quiet question. What about the boy? Cole's photo taken at age 9 blew sideways in the wind. His face, frozen in time, stared out over the water. The sheriff gave a short press conference. Mark Johnson was officially declared deceased victim of homicide. But Cole's status remained unchanged. Missing, presumed abducted. No arrests. No suspects. A new chapter had begun. But instead of answers, it raised a darker question. What really happened out there? Was Mark killed trying to protect his son? Was Cole taken and the boat sunk to erase the evidence? Or did someone want both gone and only got halfway? The lake looked peaceful that evening. Still, clear, but beneath the surface, the silence screamed louder than ever. The day after the remains were confirmed as Mark Johnson, the recovery team returned to Lake Wren not for a body this time, but the boat. A crane was positioned at the shoreline. Divers attached heavy-duty straps around the aluminum frame still submerged in silt. Slowly, winch cables creaked, and the lake gave up what it had hidden for nearly a decade. As the hull broke the surface, black water gushed from its sides. Lakeweed hung from the bow like hair. The whole vessel was misshapen, bent, warped, and coated in layers of moss and mud. It was placed gently on a blue tarp. Flashbulbs clicked. Investigators circled silently. Then someone pointed, running along. The starboard side were a series of deep gouges, clean, sharp, and deliberate. Not caused by rocks, not impact. Slash marks, multiple. One sliced into the aluminum nearly 2 inches deep. Another tore through the outer hull like a can opener. Detectives froze. This wasn't just old damage. This was targeted. Someone had wanted this boat to sink. One investigator whispered, "It's not a crash. It's a crime scene." And suddenly, the entire case shifted. They weren't just recovering the past. They were standing at the edge of a premeditated killing. Back at the forensic facility, the boat was stripped down, every inch photographed and cataloged. Analysts took their time. What they found confirmed everyone's worst suspicion. The fuel lines had been severed, not corroded, not rotted. Cut clean, smooth slices through reinforced tubing. A knife or blade, not time, had done this. The whole slash marks weren't random either. They were concentrated low and to one side, exactly where the boat would take on water fastest if it stayed still. Someone wanted it to sink, but not immediately. Then came the gear. Most of it was what you'd expect. Rods, reels, a tackle, box. But every piece was heavier than normal. Waterlogged, yes, but beyond that. When they opened a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards, they found why. Fishing weights, dozens of them, tied together with copper wire, bundled in socks and packed around the underside of the boat. Someone had deliberately weighted it down. Not just to sink it, but to keep it sunk. Every clue pointed away from accident. This was methodical, thought out, and personal. Evidence bags piled on the table, each one labeled, each one heavier than it should have been. Detectives didn't say it out loud, But they all knew this was never just a drowning. Autopsy results finalized what everyone suspected. Mark Johnson didn't drown. The official cause of death: blunt force trauma to the back of the skull. The wound was sharp, conical, and precise, consistent with a blow from a steel pipe or weighted object. Death was immediate. But what disturbed forensic experts most was the positioning. Mark's body wasn't floating, wasn't thrown. It had been wedged tucked into the stern beneath gear and netting. One arm was crossed unnaturally. The fishing line wrapped around his wrist looked deliberate, not accidental. He hadn't fallen. He had been staged. Digital reconstructions overlaid the skull fracture with the boat's interior dimensions. There was no surface in the boat capable of inflicting that kind of damage by itself. Someone else had to have been there. The evidence painted a clear sequence. Mark was struck from behind, placed in the corner, and the boat was sabotaged to sink slow enough for the killer to get out, but fast enough to erase the scene. But they had one problem. If this was staged, if it was murder, then someone had gone to great lengths to cover it up, and yet still there was no sign of Cole, not a trace. After confirming Mark's murder, detectives turned their attention to his final months, hoping to find a motive buried in his recent movements. His bank account was quiet. No big purchases. No strange withdrawals, except that I explained $900 the day before the trip. But it was his side work that raised flags. Mark had been picking up extra cash doing odd jobs for a rural mechanic named Vince Holloway. On paper, Holloway's garage was a small engine repair shop just outside of town. No website, no business license. But word of mouth said he paid in cash and didn't ask questions. Digging into Holloway's background revealed more. A sealed juvenile record. A 1982 mugshot, unrelated felony weapons charge. Nothing recent. But then came a DA memo from 1987. The Holloway shop had been quietly surveilled for suspected meth production. No arrest was ever made, but the document mentioned strange deliveries, late-night traffic, and barrels being moved in and out of a back storage shed. And that shop? It was less than a mile from the southern end of Lake Wren. The same direction. Mark's boat had drifted before it sank. If Mark had seen something, if he'd gotten in over his head, maybe someone wanted him silenced. And maybe Cole was collateral. One investigator, combing through archived items from 1988, found something almost dismissed back then. The old silver thermos. It had been recovered on the lake's east bank, about 4 miles from the boat ramp. The contents had long since emptied, and at the time, it was treated as routine fishing gear. It had been bagged, labeled, and shelved, forgotten. Now, with modern forensics, they tested the thermos again, this time with gas, chromatography, and advanced residue scanning. What they found changed everything. Inside the vacuum lining were trace elements of diazepam, commonly known as Valium, a strong sedative, especially dangerous when mixed with alcohol. It wouldn't have had a taste. If Mark had taken a sip before the trip, coffee, spiked with something, he'd have gotten drowsy fast. Slow reaction time, confused thinking, vulnerable. It made the blunt force trauma make more sense. If someone had wanted to ambush him, sedating him first would make it easier, cleaner, more controllable. And if Mark had been drugged from the start, then everything that happened on the boat wasn't a fight. It was an execution. Forensic examiners went back through photos of the recovered body. The scene was more than grim, it was arranged. Mark's legs had been loosely wrapped in netting, not tangled tied. The kind of knot an amateur would make quickly, just enough to keep a body from shifting during descent. His upper torso was tucked against the hull, beneath 2 folded chairs. It looked like storage, but the weight distribution suggested staging, intentional concealment. The position of the skull, angled toward the stern, didn't match any drowning profile. It was rigid, Like someone had said it there. One technician said plainly. They posed him. A detective stared at the photos in silence, then muttered, they didn't just kill him. They left him down there to rot. It wasn't a panic dump. It wasn't messy. It was quiet, clean. And chillingly planned. By early September 1997, with new forensic reports in hand, the sheriff's office held a formal press conference. The case was officially reopened as a homicide. News spread fast. Murder at Lake Wren headlined local papers. Reporters camped near the shoreline. For the first time in nearly a decade, people started talking again. One name came up over and over: Vince Holloway. But Holloway was gone. 2 days after the news broke. He didn't show up at his shop. His property was dark. Mail piled up. Neighbors said they hadn't seen his truck since Tuesday. When police went to check the house, the blinds were drawn. The garage was locked tight. Detectives filed a warrant, and in a rare brief interview, the lead investigator appeared on camera, saying, "Only, this was never an accident. We believe someone didn't just want Mark dead. They wanted the story buried." As the press conference ended, footage rolled of a home video. Cole's voice, faint and high-pitched, laughing as he reeled in a fish. Then silence. Just the lake again. Still. Wide. Indifferent. And somewhere out there, still no sign of the boy. 2 weeks after the case was officially reopened, the search perimeter near Lake Wren expanded. This time, crews weren't just looking underwater. A secondary grid was formed across the dense forest south of the lake, tracing old logging paths and deer trails. Metal detectors swept the underbrush. Drones circled above. Most of what they found was trash beer cans, fishing line, bits of rusted wire. But on day 4, one volunteer, a retired firefighter, spotted something strange about 30 yards off the main path. Half buried beneath a patch of rotting pine needles was a child's sneaker. He didn't touch it. He just radioed the team. When the evidence unit arrived, they moved slow. A gloved hand lifted the shoe gently, brushing away dirt. It was faded blue canvas, small, about a boy's size 3. The tongue had been shredded by weather, but the laces were still tied. The search halted. Photos were taken. Soil samples gathered. Back at the lab, DNA testing confirmed what many feared. But if you had dared to hope, it belonged to Cole Johnson. After 9 years, this was the first physical proof that the boy had ever left the boat. Or maybe had never been on it at all. Investigators stood silently around the table. The shoe sat in an evidence tray, lit by a single lamp. It was the kind of discovery that should have brought relief. Instead, it raised a darker possibility. If Cole survived the attack, where did he go? And who, if anyone, helped him disappear? The surrounding area was combed for 6 straight days. Cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar, even heat-sensing drones. Nothing. No bones. No remains. No clothing. Just the shoe. The location didn't suggest a struggle. No broken branches. No blood trace. No drag marks. It was as if Cole had stepped out of the woods and vanished. Detectives began to quietly ask a question that had never been seriously considered before. Was Cole ever on the boat? Or had Mark dropped him off intentionally or not before heading into the water? The theory shook the foundation of the original case. Maybe the murder had nothing to do with a child witness. Maybe Cole had escaped before it happened. Or maybe someone had taken the boy separately. A new possibility emerged. That Cole had run, survived, wandered into the forest, confused, drugged, or terrified, and was picked up by someone. The woods were vast. And in 1988, the roads weren't patrolled. If someone had been watching from a distance, the opportunity was there. One detective stood at the edge of the clearing, tape fluttering behind him. He whispered to a colleague. He might have gotten out, and if he did, then somewhere, 4. Some amount of time Cole was still alive. The discovery of Cole's shoe reignited every lid that had once been dismissed. The FBI reopened archived interviews from 1988, cross-checking them against newly digitized logs. That's when they found it. One paragraph buried in an old incident summary from July 18th, 2 days after the Johnsons vanished. A logger named Roy Eastman had called the sheriff's office. He said he'd seen something strange while driving a supply truck near the back of a logging trail 20 miles from Lake Wren. According to the report, Roy spotted a young boy barefoot, dirty, and staring into the trees. But the note ended there. No follow-up. No second interview. Roy Eastman died of a stroke in 1991. But when agents tracked down his daughter, she gave them something else. One of her father's old journals. Inside, dated July 1988, was a page that read, "Saw a boy today. Looked about. 8 or 9. No shoes. He was shaking. Wouldn't talk. Just blinked at me like I was a ghost. Then he ran." The handwriting was shaky, but the description matched Cole's age, build, and hair, and it was dated the day after Mark's presumed murder. For the first time in 9 years, a witness had possibly seen Cole alive. And no one followed up. That journal entry changed everything. The working theory shifted again. Investigators now believed Mark had been killed on the boat, but Cole had either escaped or was spared, then somehow ended up deep in the forest. Whether he ran from the scene or was dropped off before the attack, the outcome was the same. He was alive after the murder. Search analysts began remapping the area using modern satellite data overlaid with 1988 road layouts and topography. They charted possible paths a 9-year-old could have taken on foot, from the lake to the logging trail where Eastman spotted him. Most routes were overgrown now, but several led to secondary roads, hunting cabins, and even one long abandoned. Ranger Station. It meant something terrifying. Cole might have survived for hours, maybe days, wandering, hiding, or searching for help. Or someone found him. And if they did, why didn't they come forward? In the mind of investigators, one line grew bolder with every piece of evidence. Cole wasn't lost. He got out. The theory that Cole may have survived gained traction inside the FBI. A cold case analyst, sifting through years of peripheral tips, began cross-referencing regional 911 logs from 1988 to 1995, focusing on anything child-related near logging routes or transient corridors. One call stood out. Dated June 12, 1993, it came from a payphone outside a roadside gas station in Redding, California, over 300 miles from Lake Wren. The caller didn't identify themselves. The audio was faint, barely audible, but when the analyst boosted the file and ran it through modern cleanup software, the voice came through clear enough to chill the room. A child, whispering, "He killed my dad. He's coming back." Then silence. No hang-up click, just the soft hum of an open line. And then the call ends. At the time, it was dismissed as a prank. No missing person report was filed. No follow-up. But now, armed with Cole Johnson's home videos, the team ran a waveform. Comparison. The tone, cadence, speech patterns. Even the quiet way the "sess" sounds lingered, almost a lisp, matched eerily well to Cole's known recordings. Side by side, the clips were jarring. On the left, Cole at 8 years old, whispering a joke into his dad's VHS camcorder. On the right, a terrified voice, nearly 5 years later, asking for help. The match wasn't definitive, but it wasn't ignorable either. And for the first time in nearly a decade, the question was no longer what happened to Cole. It was, where had he gone? Following the lead from the 1993 call, agents were dispatched to Redding. The area had changed in the years since, but certain things hadn't, especially the terrain. The gas station where the call was placed still existed, though under new ownership. Security footage from that time had long been overwritten, but interviews with older locals turned up something unexpected. A church-run shelter 2 blocks from the phone had operated a soup kitchen and overnight housing in the early 90s. Most records were destroyed in a basement flood, but a retired volunteer recalled a boy who briefly stayed there around that time. He didn't speak much, she said. Maybe 9 or 10. Real pale, wore a too big hoodie. I remember because the pastor tried asking his name, and the boy just shook his head. Didn't cry. Just looked scared. He was gone by morning. That same week, someone anonymously dropped off a child-sized flannel and a pair of muddy socks in the shelter donation bin. No one ever claimed them. Later, investigators found an old group photo taken outside the soup line, a blurry snapshot from July 1993. In the far right corner, partially hidden behind a man with a clipboard, was a small boy with downcast eyes. The face wasn't clear, but the outline, the size, the posture. One agent circled it in red pen and wrote 2 words underneath. Possible Cole? If it was him, it meant he had survived nearly 5 years alone, silent and hiding. From what? And why didn't he ever come back? In early 1998, 6 months after the case was officially reopened, police in Southern Oregon received an unexpected call from a hospice nurse. A terminal patient, Curtis Ray, 68, had something to say. Ray was a known felon in and out of prison since the late 60s. His file included burglary, weapons possession, and drug distribution. By all accounts, he had kept quiet for years. But now, dying of lung cancer and tethered to an oxygen tank, he wanted it off his conscience. In a dim hospital room with a recorder running, he told detectives a story that had been buried for nearly a decade. He said that in July 1988, he was paid $1,500 in cash to meet a man at Lake Wren in the middle of the night. He didn't know the full plan, just that a boat needed to disappear. He helped tow it, weight it down, and sink it near the southern drop-off. He never asked questions. Didn't want to know, he said. But before the session ended, he gave one more chilling detail. He wasn't working alone. Detectives leaned in. Who was he? Ray's lips trembled. His breathing rattled. But he wouldn't say the name. Only this. If I tell you who it was, I'm scared he'll find my family. Then he turned his head toward the window and said nothing else. Curtis Ray's confession set off alarms. One detail stood out. He'd been paid through a contracting job, a term that, when searched, led police to a short-lived company. Registered in 1987 under the name North End Excavation. It no longer existed, but the listed business address. A warehouse once owned by Earl Benwick. Benwick was a wealthy property developer in Northern Oregon. Quiet, respected, and connected. His portfolio included everything from real estate flips to private logging roads. On paper, nothing illegal. But the deeper investigators dug, the darker it got. Benwick had employed both Mark Johnson and Curtis Ray, not directly, but through shell companies. Most of them dissolved within 18 months, and Benwick's reach didn't stop there. He had donated thousands to the re-election campaign of Sheriff Avery Lennox, the same sheriff who oversaw the original Johnson disappearance case, and who quietly retired in 1991 after a family emergency. Old photos emerged, Benwick and Lennox shaking hands at a county fair. A handwritten thank you letter from Lennox to Benwick was found in archived campaign materials. Then came the breakthrough. A match on a signature. Benwick had personally signed the rental lease for a remote lakeside shed near the southern bank of Lake Wren. In June 1988, 3 weeks before Mark and Cole vanished, with Curtis Ray's testimony and a newly filed affidavit, police submitted a search warrant. And finally, they were going to dig under the surface, literally. The search warrant was approved by sunrise. By noon, a team of investigators and forensic techs had arrived at the farthest edge of Earl Benwick's northern property, 20 acres of dense timberland, untouched in over a decade, near a decommissioned well, partially hidden by brush and ivy. They found it, a corrugated metal utility shed, locked with a rusted padlock. The hinges creaked when they pried it open. Inside, the air was damp and rotting. Mold coated the walls. Broken tools leaned in corners. A single workbench sagged under the weight of a tarp-covered bin. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years, but the bin wasn't empty. Beneath the tarp, buried in old burlap sacks, was a small child's backpack faded red, with peeling patches of cartoon fish. Inside were a handful of fishing lures, a zippered pouch of crayons, and a warped sketchbook. Its corners curled from heat dot. Half the pages were blank. The others had water-damaged drawings, one of a stick figure standing near a lake. Another of two figures in a boat. One page had been partially burned, black edges creeping inward. The forensic tag read, Cole Johnson, confirmed DNA. Silence fell over the scene. This wasn't just evidence. This was something he had left behind. A piece of a boy who until now had only existed in memories and photos. One detective whispered what everyone was thinking. He was here. While the shed was being processed, cadaver dogs were deployed in a 40-yard radius. It didn't take long. Near a moss-covered stump, just behind the shed, one dog began circling, then digging dot under 10 inches of compacted soil. Investigators uncovered a sealed PVC pipe capped at both ends and stained with rust. They opened it slowly. Inside, wrapped in clear plastic, was a rusted metal object. Thin, slightly bent. The grip still intact. It was a fishing rod child-sized. And even beneath the grime, detectives recognized the model. A red Zebco 202 combo, the same one Cole had been photographed holding on the dock in 1988. It wasn't just a match. It was his initial CJ had been scratched into the base. With a pin or a nail. Small crooked letters. The kind a kid would carve. For a moment, no one said a word. They found no bones. No remains. No definitive proof of death. But the items told a story quietly, hauntingly. Cole had been taken here. Or he had come here. Either way, he'd made it this far. The detective held the rod with gloved hands and looked toward the lake, just barely visible through the trees. That's his, he said softly, and the case finally was almost closed. Despite a full-scale excavation around the shed site, no human remains were recovered. Soil tests suggested the area hadn't been disturbed beyond the PVC pipe. Still, the evidence told enough of a story. Cole's DNA in the backpack, the fishing rod, the shoe found years earlier, combined with Mark's confirmed homicide and Curtis. Ray's confession, the district attorney ruled the case legally resolved. The official cause, homicide by known associates. Motive, unknown. Victim, Mark Johnson. Secondary victim, Cole Johnson presumed. Deceased due to prolonged absence and corroborating artifacts, but the closure came with no comfort. The final report was stamped with 4 chilling words. Resolved, insufficient remains. At the courthouse press briefing, reporters pushed for answers. The lead detective offered little beyond what was already known. A woman in the front row. Mark's sister collapsed into the arms of her husband as the words "presumed dead" echoed. From the podium, across the town, local papers ran their own versions of the same tragic headline. Cole Johnson, gone, but never found. The official file may have closed, but for the community, and for those who still left porch lights on for him, it felt more like a verdict without a trial. Lake Wren eventually returned to normal levels, fed by snowmelt and time. But everything around it had changed. On a quiet slope above the boat ramp, just beside the old trailhead, the city installed a memorial bench. It faced the water, framed by pine trees and silence. A bronze plaque, bolted to the wood, bore two names: Mark Johnson, 1955 to 1988, Cole Johnson, 1980. Beneath the names, a simple line: lost but not forgotten. Locals visited often, some to leave flowers, others just to sit. No one ever stayed long. There was something about the lake now, something that asked for reverence. Every July 16th, without fail, someone left two things on the bench: a small thermos and a folded drawing. The bench became a landmark, not just of loss, but of memory. Parents brought their children to explain what had happened here. Teenagers whispered theories. Old fishermen nodded quietly when they passed, and beside the plaque was a space. Empty. Unfinished. When asked, the engraver said he'd left it intentionally. In case they find something more, he told the paper, or someone. Aerial footage taken for the 10-year documentary showed the bench at golden hour. The lake shimmered. The fog rolled gently over the water. And the camera pulled back slowly until the shoreline was a thread. No screams, no answers. Just one still, steady place where a father and son once disappeared. The screen fades to black.